So a lot of people ask, why would we actually go to all this trouble and treat a survivor like Hope? And for me, there's actually two important parts there. The one is obviously we feel that she will probably make it. So for us, it's really important to save a life. But even more important than that is that we are, as we go along and we treat these survivors, we're actually learning about them, and we're learning how to treat these survivors. Currently, we probably have about 18 to 22,000 rhino in Southern Africa left. So for me, it's important to learn these procedures now and to see what works, and to see what kind of treatments we can apply, and how we can alter those treatments to eventually have a treatment that we can apply on a rhino like Hope or any other survivor that will be quite effective. We don't know this info, and we need to gain that info now, because we can't leave this until there's about 4 or 5 or 6,000 rhino left, because all of this actually takes time, and it takes 2-3 years to learn actually all of this. If we look at the last 3-4 years, we've lost about 4,000 rhino. So where do we go to, and where do we decide if we have so many rhino left, we would start actually treating them and gain this knowledge, which is very important to actually decide, will we treat this rhino or not? We don't have this knowledge. We don't have the knowledge of the anatomy of a rhino, of the anatomy of the head or the limbs, or the knowledge of which antibiotics to use, which anti-inflammatories or painkillers to use. We don't know any of that. And it's very important to, as quickly as possible, to gain that knowledge now over the next year or 2 or 3, to apply that to help save the species. Pain is a very subjective issue in animals. I think the amount of pain they experience, if you compare it to human beings, are completely different. And obviously we don't know exactly what kind of pain that they experience, but there are certain things that we can look at. It's very difficult for us to determine what kind of pain a rhino goes through. For instance, in the case of Hope, where half the face has been cut off. We do everything in our power to give them painkillers. The problem though is we don't know which dosages to give them, so we borrow from horses, because rhinos and horses are very similar in their physiology, and it's also not possible or practical a lot of times in these wild animals to give them painkillers. Because how do you give it in the food? Often they won't take the food. If at the moment they taste there's something strange in there, you can't dart them daily, so it becomes very difficult to give them painkillers. But there are certain things that we can look at. That is the animal alert, does it walk around, does it run around, does it eat, and from that we can have a more or less an idea that is this animal in a lot of pain or not. And for instance, with Hope, we are completely overwhelmed and surprised actually that she's doing so well. If you just look at that horrific injury, you would think she would be in a massive amount of pain, but it appears that she is not, which is very surprising to us. Currently, there's not much known about rhino. We lose about 1,200, which is very conservative. I would say it's probably closer to 1,400, 1,500 rhino every year. And currently we know very little about rhino. We are getting there over the last 2.5 years, but all of this obviously needs funding. It's a very important part of this whole process, where people donate towards a rhino like Hope. It's also very important, but they have to understand it doesn't only go towards Hope, it also goes towards all the other survivors, because what we might not learn on her is there's something quite different with another rhino. Maybe it's got a gunshot wound in the leg or in the abdomen, and we learn then a massive amount of info there. So it's very important to use this funding not only towards hope, but always also towards all the other rhino that we're treating, all these other survivors, because in the end we gain a whole lot of knowledge to treat and to save the rhino species, especially survivors, which will help for the continuation of the rhino species in Africa.